we're going to talk about the differences between major and minor. And to do that, we're going to use scales first, and we'll talk about the differences between a major scale and a minor scale. And then afterwards, we'll talk about the difference between a major interval and a minor interval. So the first step in determining if something's major or minor is knowing what the difference is between a whole step and a half step. So a good example would be on A string, that second finger. So when you learn C sharp, B to C sharp is a whole step because we can fit a note between those two notes. Now C sharp to D is a half step because we can't fit another note in between those two notes. Now if we lower that second finger to C natural, B to C natural is a half step, and then C natural to D is a whole step. Now that we know what the difference is between a whole step and a half step, we can start determining if a scale is major or minor. So for example, I'm going to use D major. So when we start our D major scale, we have an open string, D, then we can play D to E, which is a whole step because we can fit another note behind that first finger. Now E to F sharp is a whole step, F sharp to G is a half step, G to A is a whole step, A to B is a whole step, B to C sharp is a whole step, and C sharp to D is a half step. So the reason we can tell that's major is because the first two intervals are whole steps. So from D to E and E to F sharp are whole steps. And then our first half step is from F sharp to G, between the third and fourth note of the scale. Another important interval there is from C sharp to D, which is the seventh to the octave, and that's a half step. So in minor, those are different. If we use D minor now as our next example, the key signature for that would be B flat. So we have no sharps, just B flat. And so that's going to change how we play the scale. So from D to E is a whole step, E to F is a half step. So right away, we already have a difference. We have D to E, a whole step, E to F is a half step. So then we have F to G is a whole step, G to A is still a whole step, A to B flat is a half step because we can't put another note behind that first finger. Okay, and then B flat to C is a whole step. And then here's another good important difference, which is C to D, which is a whole step. Using those patterns, you can determine if a scale is major or minor if you're just given a scale and no one tells you if it's major or minor. Now we can apply the same type of pattern for determining intervals, and one of which would be a minor third versus a major third. So we already know, as we've discussed before, D to F sharp is a third. But what we don't maybe know is if it's a major third or a minor third. Now, since we know D and F sharp are found in the D major scale, we can probably assume it's a major third. But let's say you're given a different interval and you're not so sure. So let's do maybe B, the first finger on A, to D, and let's figure out what kind of third that is. So the way we figure that out is counting the number of half steps between the two notes. So with B, we start with B natural, we don't count that one, but we count the next one, which is C. So that's one half step. Then we add C sharp, which is 2. Then we have D, which is 3. So 3 half steps. This means it's minor because a minor third only has 3 half steps. A major third would have 4 half steps. So if we go back to D to F sharp, the one that we know is a major third, let's count the half steps. So we start with D, E flat is 1, E natural is 2, F natural is 3, then F sharp is 4. So that's one way to determine the difference between a major third and a minor third. The same type of idea can be applied to other intervals. Another major one would be probably like the 7th. So in D major, we had C sharp, and C sharp is the 7th note of our D major scale. And since it's in the major scale, it's a major seventh. You could also count the half steps if you want to, but it would probably be easier to memorize the seventh note of a major and minor scale and figure it out that way. Or you can actually go backwards. So let's say you have D to C sharp. Instead of counting all the way up from D to C sharp, you can just take the highest, the closest D to C sharp, which would be this one, and count back. So that's a half step between those two. So that makes it a major seventh. Now, if it were C natural, it has a whole step. So from D to this C natural, it would be a minor seventh. But from D to this C sharp, it's a major seventh. So yeah, you can kind of practice that and find maybe at least your major thirds, minor thirds, or major sevenths, minor sevenths. Another good one would be sixth. So for example, D to B is a major sixth because we can find D and B in the D major scale, while D to B flat would be a minor sixth. And you could practice counting those half steps and figuring out how many half steps would be between D and B and D and B flat to determine major or minor. If you look at the link below, it's to a whole list of melodic minor scales. And just a real quick note about that, melodic minor borrows from the major scale a little bit for the way up, and then on the way down is completely minor. So the main difference there is that the sixth and seventh note are major intervals on the way up, and then they're minor intervals on the way down. That wraps up a little introduction to major and minor scales, as well as major and minor intervals. And so you can kind of use your scales to figure out which intervals are major and which intervals are minor. And you can hopefully apply this to your music as well as you continue to play and sight read and things like that.